Hello there. This is a fairly difficult video for me to make, but it has been requested, and since it's in my thoughts constantly, I feel like I should be talking about this. And the subject matter of today's video is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, even though Russia refuses to call it an invasion. But we all know it's an invasion, clearly. I will be discussing what I think are the causes of the conflict and how it affects the surrounding countries, neighbors of Russia who are not allied with them in any way, shape or form. Mainly, Finland, as I am Finnish myself. But let's start with the reasons of the conflict, and obviously there are some facts about it, but I see three main reasons for the invasion, and two of those are fact, and one of them is just speculation. Let's start with the facts. Fact: Russia has been concerned about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, pushing eastwards, having had military exercises with Finland and Sweden here in the north, and having had certain dealings with Ukraine. So Russia did make a demand that Ukraine be barred from ever joining the alliance, and that's from Russia's point of view the main cause of the conflict, as countries in NATO, predominantly the USA, accused Russia of planning to attack or invade Ukraine, and well, it turned out to be a correct assessment. The other reason for the war is that Russia has not very subtly been working towards controlling Ukraine. There are multiple instances of proof, such as the 2014, call it what you will, but Russia did conquer Crimea. It probably could called a forcible annexation, and they also have been backing the two rebel factions in eastern Ukraine, the so-called republics of Luhansk and Donetsk. The Russians claim these are of Russian people, a Russian minority, but they are called people's republics. So my personal takeaway is that they are more Soviets than Russians, to be fair. And this goes in hand with Vladimir Putin openly glorifying Stalin of all people. If I wanted to glorify some figures in the Russian Revolution that led into it becoming the Soviet Union, I would glorify Lenin or even Trotsky, but not Stalin. Stalin was a mad dog, and Lenin himself knew that. So there should never be a reason to glorify Stalin. Stalin is probably the worst mass murderer in the history of the world. Just check the statistics on how many Russian Soviet citizens were killed and exiled during his reign of terror. Just check it out. I think you'll agree with me on that one. But the one thing that I consider personally to be a likely scenario, but it's still mere speculation, is that I think sometime in the past half year, Vladimir Putin had a brush with death. He had to face his own age and own mortality. And he realized that his great ambition of restoring Russia to its former glory, the glory he personally knew when he was a KGB agent, he's in a hurry. Which is why he did something as sloppy as this invasion. Because if he had been planning an invasion like this all along, he should have done it when the Crimea annexation took place. Because, let's be honest, Ukraine was unprepared for the Russian military might in 2014. But now they have had time to build their military to be probably the second largest in Europe. I haven't checked, but I think it is, because anyway, it's one of the largest militaries in Europe due to Russian aggression. And if Putin had planned an invasion, that would have been the time to do it. Afterwards, Ukraine started preparing, and they had almost 8 years to prepare. Now, I'm no military expert in modern warfare, but I'm fairly well versed in medieval conflicts. And if a nation had almost a decade to prepare for an invasion they knew was coming, they had a much better chance at defending themselves than just facing an attack out of the blue. So either that wasn't Putin's original plan or it was sloppy. I think he tried to consolidate control, influence in Ukraine through the two rebel factions. Either that wasn't working out, or it was working out way too slowly for his ambitions. And therefore he attacked. Also, the timing of the attack was no coincidence, because just days before the attack began, Putin was hanging out with his pal in China for the Olympics. So the invasion was definitely planned to start right after the Olympics. Now, also this is speculation, but it seems obvious to me. Now, I'm not too well versed in how the war is currently going, but as far as I can tell, Ukraine is holding their ground pretty well, considering Russia has one of the strongest militaries in the world. And they have been receiving support, not military support directly, like forces from other countries, but it is widely recognized that Russia is in the wrong. In modern warfare, usually the aggressor is the one that's vilified, and so it should be. Now, we should discuss the condemnations of the invasion, such as United Nations General Assembly, but let's be honest. In the United Nations, the Security Council is the only faction that can actually stop wars. And when the aggressor is one of the nations with a veto right to any decisions made there, the United Nations is worthless for the people of Ukraine at this time. I mean, they may be encouraging economic sanctions against Russia, but Russia can also impose their own sanctions. I mean, Russia's economy is currently very weak, but a lot of countries, especially in the Eastern Europe, are dependent on Russia for certain things, such as diesel. It's a fairly common fuel for cars, and in Finland, the price of diesel has almost doubled since the conflict began, and we don't even have an actual shortage of it yet. It's just simply an anticipation of shortage. Based on what I know on economics, that's economics 101. It's the same thing in any economic situation. When a shortage is expected, prices go up. And when the shortage actually begins, the prices go up even more. So the economic sanctions on Russia are a double-edged blade, because they do have enough trade partners outside of Europe to make do quite nicely. Take China, Iran, Syria. For examples, they have significant amounts of wealth and resources to keep trading with Russia without it being an inconvenience to either of those parties. Now, things might become more expensive both in Eastern Europe and Western Russia, but I don't think these sanctions are quite enough to make Russia back off. Even if they thought the sanctions were bad, which we have no idea if they do, the question is, are any economic sanctions enough as long as China is trading with Russia? And if the war were to escalate into Russian soil, say NATO took part in the conflict and fighting escalated to Russian soil, there would be a high probability that Russia's allies beside Belarus would join the war, and then we would have a third world war. Alliances against alliances. That's how World War starts. And that is my primary concern about this conflict. to be honest. Even though it is sad and terrible and terrifying what Russia is doing to Ukraine, my fear of a worldwide conflict is much greater than my concern for any individual nation. The only way to prevent Russia from pushing westwards without an escalation is not fighting on Russian soil, because that's just a bad idea. I have been too terrified to even speak up about this until now. And I decided to stop being a utter coward, but I'm still afraid. And I think it should be taken into account when making decisions. This is probably the main reason NATO is not involved militarily at this point, because it would be too much of a risk that the fighting would spread outside Ukraine into Russia, and that would be something NATO does not want. Now, what about the European Union? Now, considering Ukraine is not a member of the European Union, nor does it fulfill the qualifications of becoming one, I don't think the EU will take part in this conflict beyond the economic sanctions. And hosting the refugees fleeing Ukraine. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a bit. I don't think European countries will be able to take on any refugees from any other conflicts anytime soon. Not especially not in Eastern Europe. So we could also discuss Finland. Now, there's no conflict in Finland. We have condemned the attacks. There has been widespread discussion about joining NATO immediately. Now, there has been called for a referendum on joining NATO, and I think that's folly. Even if the referendum would pass and would lead to Finland submitting a membership application to NATO, I think even organizing the referendum would be considered a provocation by Russia and would be grounds for invasion before the application could even be processed by NATO. So if Finland were to join NATO in the light of this invasion, it should be done behind closed doors, be kept quiet, and ask NATO to be very discreet about it and very quick. because for countries such as Finland, a military alliance would be the best way to keep us safe. Now, there have been arguments about maintaining our neutrality, but it doesn't matter. We are in the European Union. We've had common military exercises with the USA. Russia already considers us a part of the Western Bloc. So if one of the main sides no longer considers us to be neutral, we can't really play the neutrality card anymore. So my personal take is we should join NATO discreetly. Now, some might be confused. I have been a major anti-NATO advocate in the past, but I did some research I, for some reason, neglected to do when I was younger and this issue was last discussed in length. I think it's been 5 years since I last looked into these things, and I failed to take into account a few things. NATO operations can only be authorized if every single member country agrees to it. There needs to be an unanimous decision of it, or it cannot be done. That's why most of US operations on foreign soil in the past years, such as the events of the Arab Spring, were not NATO operations, they were US operations. The only way start of a conflict with NATO in it doesn't require an unanimous vote is if one of the member countries is attacked. So in that way, I feel like it would be in Finland's best interests to join, as from Russia's point of view we've lost our neutrality and we need military allies. A defensive military allies. Finland has not been an aggressor in a war since the Second World War. Actually, some of the terms of the peace treaty with the Soviet Union after our defeat were that the Finnish army be disbanded in its entirety and replaced by a new military force, the defense forces of Finland. Yes, legally Finland does not have an army, we have defense forces. And our law dictates that we can't use it for aggressive operations. I don't think the law has been changed since it was made. As far as I know, Finland cannot legally be an aggressor in a war without changing that law first. So that's my thoughts on the matter. They are very unstructured, very chaotic. I hope you could follow my reasoning and logic here, and do leave your opinions down below. Correct me if I was factually incorrect. If you're from Ukraine and watching this, tell me how you're doing. I'm really worried about your people there. And if you enjoyed this type of video, please leave a like. Only if I get likes and subscriptions from videos, I know the video has been content you guys like to see. So share the video, get me views, get me likes, get me subscriptions. That's the only way I know you want to hear me discuss these types of things in future. And I'll see you guys next week, unless you drop by in my streams. I hope this conflict is resolved as fast as possible without Ukraine losing their independence. Toodles!